Brunswick Communications operator Smith.
It's February 23rd. Two 911 calls come from the Satilla Shores neighborhood of Brunswick, Georgia.
The guy in the house right now. House service disruption. And he's running right now. There he goes right now.
Glenn County Police find 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery dying in the street from 3 gunshot wounds. Father and son Gregory and Travis McMichael are questioned and released. The next day, Waycross District Attorney George Barnhill tells police no grounds exist for arresting the McMichaels or the person who filmed the shooting. But Barnhill is not in charge of the case. February 27, Brunswick District Attorney Jackie Johnson asked for another prosecutor to take over. The reason? Gregory McMichael worked as an investigator in her office for years. The same day, Barnhill is formally appointed to the case. April 1st, the autopsy report is released. In a letter to Glenn County Police, Barnhill says the autopsy affirms his opinion that there is insufficient probable cause for arrest. Barnhill also says he will step away from the case at the request of Arbery's family. April 7. The Georgia Attorney General's office receives Barnhill's request to appoint another prosecutor. Barnhill says his son worked with Greg McMichael on a case involving Arbery. April 13. The AG's office appoints Tom Durden. He is the third prosecutor to take over the case. Public pressure mounts in Glenn County to bring charges against the men involved.
There are a lot of people who are discouraged and believe that this is going to be one of those cases that has happened in other parts of the nation where life was lost and justice was not rendered.
Glenn County Police request the Georgia Bureau of Investigation's help with threats against officers involved in the Arbery case. May 5th. Video of the deadly encounter goes viral. The case explodes across the country. Durden says he will present the case to a grand jury. But COVID-19 shutdowns mean the case won't be heard any earlier than June. The next day, the GBI steps in. The investigation picks up speed. May 7th, Travis and Gregory McMichael are arrested. May 11th, Cobb County District Attorney Joyette Holmes takes over the case, the fourth prosecutor to become involved. The same day, the Attorney General asked for an investigation of possible misconduct by the first 2 prosecutors for failing to reveal Barnhill's involvement in the case before he took over.
Unbelievable. I mean, usually when we're looking at these cases and you're looking for something that's gone wrong, you look at the investigator. No, they're looking at the lawyers. They're looking at the district attorneys in this one. Let's bring everyone back in here. And that's the first thing that jumps out to me in this one, Ashley, is that, hey, normally when we're talking about problems, it's, the problems with the investigation, the cops are doing a favor for another cop. Here, it's going up another level. It looks like the district attorneys were the ones who need to be looked at a little more closely.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if you start hearing the terms prosecutorial misconduct being thrown around. Although, Vinny, you know well what that entails. It's a pretty high bar to be able to achieve that kind of a conviction. It usually requires some kind of malice and some kind of nefarious action, as opposed to just sloppiness or stupidity or neglect, that sort of thing. But I think without question, this is going to be a very significant part of this case. What did the prosecutors do? What did they know? When did they know it? How did they react? And did they react in a criminal way?
And Ted, the other part of this is all happening at once, right? So you've got the investigation into the actual shooting kind of taking place at the same time that they're investigating the investigation into the shooting.
Yeah, well, outside agencies, which was the key here. I think that there's a real argument, though, that, making that leap to this is a horrible, nefarious inside job, that is a high bar, to Ashley's point. Prosecutorial misconduct is way up there, and I think you can make a poor argument, but an argument that they looked at the evidence, they looked at the video, and they saw something that the rest of us didn't see, and they decided that they couldn't win this case in this county. I know it sounds horrible, it sounds ridiculous, but I do think they have that the odds of a prosecutor going down very slim. I wouldn't hold your breath.
Yeah, Chanley, I look at it and I say, when you have a conflict of interest, you step away from the case as soon as possible. But with the conflict of interest, it seems that each of the first two prosecutors were taking some level of action in the way the case was handled, something that they needed to recuse themselves from.
Right, Vinny, but they both adamantly deny it now. There were even calls for their resignation to step down from office. But Jackie Johnson's been very clear from the beginning that on the day of the shooting, that the investigators, the detectives called two of her assistant DAs. They both immediately allegedly told them that they were going to step down and recuse. She referred it to Barnhill, who the next day gave his opinion about the case. But that's where the Attorney General, Chris Carr, has the problem, because he was not aware when he handed the case over to Barnhill that Barnhill had already told the police that there was no grounds for arrest, or he wouldn't have handed it over to Barnhill. So that's where we get all of this, and potentially there's an investigation at the federal level against these prosecutors as well. Who knows what may happen?
Yeah, it gets ugly very quickly. All right, Chandler, let's talk about this text message that came out today from December 20th. This is shaking a lot of people up. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, this is a text message that an officer who responded to Larry English. Now, he's the owner of the property under construction where Ahmaud Arbery was alleged to be seen minutes before this chase happened, February 23rd. And there are a series of surveillance videos over the months since last October who may be Ahmaud Arbery stopping at this home under construction. Well, on December 20th, Larry English called because he gets these alerts on his cell phone when his motion censored cameras on his property go off. He doesn't live there, he lives somewhere else, so he gets alerts. Well, these text messages were sent from the officer at the police department that he called and talked to, an Officer Rash. And the surveillance video that actually alerted him on this day was one where a couple, a Caucasian male and female, are seen entering the home under construction while Larry English calls police. Anyways, the officer eventually texts Larry English this text message. There's the video now, the couple that enters the home that Larry English called police about. This is apparently an ongoing problem at this property, Vinny. So he receives a text message on December 20th, 9:40 a.m. It says, "Your neighbor at 229 Satilla Drive is Greg McMichael. Greg is retired law enforcement and also a retired investigator from the DA's office. He said, please call him day or night when you get action on your camera." And he goes on to actually give him Greg McMichael's phone number. These are newly released from the attorney of Larry English.
This, there's a lot of ways to read this, but let's go around and get some reaction. I mean, my reaction is that somehow, some way, it's like Greg McMichael is now out of retirement, and his big case is solving the big trespassing that's taking place at the construction site caper. Ashley, I don't understand this. Why are police passing the buck?
I think you could look at it as passing the buck. I think you could look at it as, hey, Mr. English, there's a guy who lives 2 doors down who's got a lot of experience in investigating. He was one of us, and he said he'd be happy to help you out as a neighbor. I mean, I have a former police officer who lives down the street from me, and I've asked him a few favors before, when he was retired. So I'm not so sure that's so indicting. I got to be honest. I just think neighbors look out for neighbors, and since there'd been so much activity at Mr. English's property under construction, by the way, the neighborhood had been sharing a lot of these videos through the Nextdoor app. If you know what the Nextdoor app is, it's a neighborhood group sort of chat. All over the country, neighborhoods get together. You have to be invited and allowed in, and you can sort of look out for each other. And I get alerts all the time saying cars being broken into 4 doors down or 3 neighborhoods over, keep on the alert. And people share their videos and say, has anybody seen this guy? He broke into my car last night. So I don't see that as so weird. I see that as a police officer saying, the neighbor 2 doors down from you is a former cop. He said he'd be happy to give you a hand, and he asked me to pass on his info to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it does, but it doesn't. I think it's one thing, Ted, if my neighbor, say it's my friend Mike Brooks. Let's say, for instance, my friend Mike Brooks lived in my neighborhood. I might go to him. But for police to tell me to go to my neighbor. That's where I have the problem, that it's police, to serve and protect, are telling me to go talk to my neighbor?
Vinny, wait. They're not telling them. They're saying your neighbor has offered to be of assistance to you. If you read the text carefully, they're not saying only call him next time. They're saying your neighbor, Mr. McMichael, has offered to help out here, and I'm passing on his number for you. So I think that's a very different thing than directing him.
That's the problem, though, Ashley, is that the police reached out to McMichael and said, hey, we got a problem right down the street from you. Hey, are you willing and able to, strap on the old gun and go at it and help us out? That's where the problem here is. I do agree with Ashley that these are all good intentions. All of this is about, helping this homeowner out with what he perceives as now a problem of people coming into his construction site. I don't think there's any malice here. I just think that this was the beginning of the McMichaels deputizing themselves and taking on that George Zimmerman were now the police in our neighborhood, and we can't wait till somebody else goes into that site because we'll be ready.
Can I add to that? It just occurred to me when Chanley did her very thoughtful package with all of that information in it, the name Officer Rash rung a bell for me. And I was thinking, why do I know that name? Why do I know that name? It's because I read the police report from February 11th. That's a couple months later, right? And the responding officer, when this happened, when there was someone on the security camera with a flashlight and the younger McMichael, Travis, went and called 911, the responding officer is Officer Rash. So I think they're all very familiar with what's going on in this small community. And of course, they all know each other because the McMichaels work, Mr. McMichael worked probably with Officer Rash at some point. So, I mean, it can sound all really nefarious. It definitely can. And it can all be very innocent, as Ted said. I think it really, the four of us, really interesting what we say. A jury is going to see it their way.
It's innocent, but it's innocent up till the point that you're grabbing shotguns and .357 Magnums. That's the problem. Is they're almost being anointed by police that it's okay. Hey, call your the police are telling him to call his neighbor. Then his neighbor decides he's going to grab a shotgun with his son, who I don't think is trained in anything, and he's got the .357 Magnum and he's jumping on the back of a pickup. It's when you put all the pieces together that it does not make any sense. Now let's talk about the alleged chase here. Chanley Painter, what can you tell us tonight about the alleged chase? Because there's a lot of noise on, and I don't want to say noise in a bad way, but people talking about, a lot of chatter, I guess is a better word. A lot of chatter on social media about some posts that have been put out there talking about the chase that took place before we see that video pick up the end of what was happening. What do we know tonight?
And that's exactly it. The video that went viral is the end of what happened. Even the defense attorneys last week saying there's more than one video of this incident because it was several minutes long of a chase for Ahmaud Arbery. I know we put together sort of a little map to show our viewers the path overall based on 911 calls and the police report, what the movements were of Ahmaud Arbery. And I believe in this graph, there's the red line will show us Ahmaud Arbery's path along Satilla Drive that day from the home under construction. And then as he moves east on Satilla Drive, you can see that he passes the McMichaels home, which is 4 or 5 houses down. And then that's when the McMichaels spot him in the front yard. So the blue line will be the McMichaels, Travis and Gregory McMichael. They go down Buford Road. There's turning around. Now, during Buford Road, they pass Roddy Bryan, that's where he lives, and they end up back on Holmes Road here. We don't know exactly what happens on this Holmes Road, but we know that Gregory McMichael made a 911 call at 1:14 p.m. as this was happening at the intersection of Holmes and Satilla Drive there in this neighborhood, and that's where they end up right there at the intersection, and that's where the viral video ends, where the blue dot is.
So I'm wondering, and to me, this part of the case is a huge part of the case, Ashley. And at the end of last week, we had defense attorneys for Greg McMichael saying, we've got another video, there are timestamps that don't match up, and there's a whole nother vantage point to this. And my guess is they may be talking about if there's more footage of this chase, or maybe a second camera here.
Yeah, I'd be really interested, as I always am in the early offings of a case, to get all the facts. It's really irresponsible, and God bless social media for connecting us all, especially during a pandemic. But it is really dangerous for people to sort of anoint themselves CSI experts when they really don't have everything yet. I think we've learned a lot in these cases, especially when it's so incredibly socially polarizing. We've learned to hold our breath and wait for other videos and wait for other evidence, because the narrative can change a lot. Vinny, you and I talked about narrative being very solid at the beginning of this case because that video is so clarifying, and yet it isn't. There's still more material, there's still more information. And I think if there's one thing I've learned in 33 years of doing this, wait for it. Just be patient. There's always more information that comes out, and it may very well bode terribly for the McMichaels, and it may not bode terribly for the McMichaels.